Hey people, welcome to the second episode of the KCD podcast in preparation of the KCD Costa Rica Kubernetes Community Days happening on the May 3rd, 2025, our second edition. We are pretty happy to be here and we are gonna have a conversation about technology. We're gonna just talk and enjoy, talking about trends, talking about different tools and what we can do in the cloud native ecosystem. As we have in the first episode, we have today Whitney, we have Viktor, and we have Gerardo.
Hello, guys. How are you? We are very happy, very excited for the chance. Welcome again, because in the first episode, we are trying to involve to the people into the community, not only for Costa Rica. Probably it doesn't matter if you are watching, I don't know, Europe, US, Africa. The idea is be involved into the community. In this episode, we want to learn more about technical things, technologies, and why not the people can collaborate in this open source project. Welcome again, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Probably, do you like the coffee here in Costa Rica?
It's great.
The food?
Food, great.
So great.
Yeah, all great, all good.
All pura vida.
Pura vida, exactly.
Okay, nice, guys. So probably right now are watching people that have experience. They are probably 10 years of experience working in technology. And you know the technology is constantly evolutioning, is changing. Today, you can learn this, and tomorrow appears new version. So what do you think it is probably the most hot or trendy topics? Of course, probably people is AI, machine learning, but talking about the cloud native ecosystem or beyond, what do you think? What is happening? What are the topics that we need to pay attention?
I think that the main topic right now is around platform engineering. Mm-hmm. And the reason behind it is that we managed to get adoption of Kubernetes, but mostly around the people who are focused on Kubernetes. And that's my job. My job is Kubernetes. And majority of companies adopted it. That's fine, right? But that's like 2% of the people in a company, right? There is other 98% of the people who are not going to spend years learning Kubernetes because they have other jobs. They're working with Node.js or they're doing something else, whatever that something is. And the idea behind platform engineering, even though technically it's not necessarily tied to Kubernetes, I feel that it's actually very related, because with building those layers on top of Kubernetes, we can enable people to use Kubernetes through higher level abstractions, right? So you don't necessarily need to know everything there is to know about Kubernetes, but if you just invoke this interface, if you just do this, if you use that higher level of abstraction on top of Kubernetes, then you get whatever you need, like your application running somewhere or your database or whatever that is, right? And I feel that that's right now where we are. We are making Kubernetes useful for people who are not focused on Kubernetes, if that makes sense.
So the problem is, when shift left happened, it became application teams' job to deploy and manage environments for their application to run in, which means we have code, like regular engineers needing to know about Kubernetes, which is reduced. It's like toil. It's duplication of effort across teams. Different teams are choosing different tools to use in Kubernetes, so it's hard to keep secure. It's fractured. It's a lot of work, and people aren't seeing like, hey, I thought when I moved to the cloud, I was going to save a lot of money and everything was going to be wonderful. And it hasn't been that way when we're asking application teams to take on all of that complexity on their own.
Interesting. I don't know if you probably is happening the same that me in my company or in different projects. You have a lot of technologies. Prometheus, Grafana, Datadog, these ones, Crossplane, Kyberno, Cilium, and you have a lot of tabs. And developers sometimes can feel, DevOps too, but thinking developers can feel overwhelming to say, oof, huge technologies, I need to learn all, or maybe I can have a platform that helps me to simplify this. I don't know.
Because all the tools that you just mentioned, right? They're designed for you. They're not designed to be used by everybody, right? Because, Grafana, cool. What am I going to look at? 57 different dashboards of the things I don't understand, right? Or what else did you say? Prometheus. What am I going to learn from QL? Of course I'm not, right? Those are all tools that are doing very specific job. And they're focused on very specific type of persona, right? The role in a company. And that's great because if you're a security expert, you need specific tools for whatever you're doing. If you're a observability person, you need specific tools for what you're doing. But you cannot give those same tools to everybody else.
Yep.
Right? That doesn't make sense because that's like, hey, if you're an electrician, you work with wires, but don't give me wires, please. I want a button, not the wires to turn on the light, right? Kind of. And that would be equivalent. If somebody constructs your house and tells you, okay, every time you need to turn on the light, you need to put those two wires together and there is light, right? No, that's good for you, not good for everybody else. And that's where those abstractions come in, right? Okay, so you have a dashboard in Grafana. I'm using Grafana because you mentioned it, right? Cool. For you, great. Now, can you imagine what would be the dashboard for everybody else? That would be a different dashboard, right? That's not the same dashboard as you're using because it's a different sample of information, different type of information, and so on and so forth. And that's the area where we need to now focus, I feel. How do we make things that are designed for me approachable by everybody else?
Yeah, that's exactly what I want to mention. It's like when you're having a problem, you want to select, maybe you solving it with a tool, but you need to understand what's the target of that tool and say, hey, well, okay, for example, Prometheus is usually to build the metrics. So are usually developers the ones that are touching the code and say, hey, we'll need to put this metric here and do this and that. But at the end, this will be consumed by another tool who's the target of that tool and say, okay, well, are developers building the dashboards or are SREs or DevOps, whatever? So we'll need to understand. And then, as you mentioned, the dashboard, who's going to use it? Because if you're a technical one, maybe you want pretty detailed stuff. But if you're a business guy, you may want to, or girl, you want to have like something simple like blue, red, green, whatever, to say, hey, well, this is for me or for us. And also, it's like what we were talking before, like we can't learn about everything. It's impossible. So maybe it will be better to have few tools solving the problems that like try to solve every problem with one tool and the other tool and the other tool.
Well, and I think there are like more than 200 CNCF projects now. Is that correct?
Yep.
Yes.
So I think the answer isn't even like, oh, we're going to help the application teams know what tool to use. Instead, it's like they don't even see the tool. They just know I need a dashboard. They look at a dashboard. They don't know underneath who's collecting the metrics, how they're being displayed, like whatever. I think that
it shouldn't be hidden. So it shouldn't be hidden. So if you want to know, great. But you don't have to.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and one, I don't know, I have some discussion sometimes with developers because they told me, Gerardo, why I need to learn all these technologies? Why I need to understand Kubernetes? Why I need to understand how or why I need to make metrics? And so it's interesting because, for example, there are other companies that say, okay, I need that my developers full stack have this knowledge. All the technology is so hard being only find one guy or one gear that has all these technologies.
So you
in
want
your
people
mind.
to be mediocre in many things. Okay.
Or other companies say, okay, doesn't matter. I need release this product as possible. I don't have time that you can learn all.
Yep.
So
you cannot learn all. Let's start with that. You cannot learn all. So
Physically not possible.
exactly, physically not possible. But so the platform can help us. The platform engineer can help us to accelerate the speed up releases of products. For example, because we can continue using technology, but we can abstract these technologies to the developers or QA or security engineers, continue using these technologies, but we can give them a product that they can apply the technologies, but can speed up the release itself.
And to be clear, the platform engineer isn't now the expert. We're not asking the platform engineer to know all of the tools. The platform and the
because
platform
then that would be again the same
they
thing.
have the same problem. We just
so you cannot know
gave it to
everything.
a different job title.
Yeah.
And so now what we want is our platform and our platform engineers to be the bridge between the developers who need these services and the experts who know the right configuration, the smart configuration for a company. And then we want to codify that and make it consumable by in a self-service way by the developers. And that's the problem. That's how we're going to fix this, where the experts are experts in what they need to know about. The platform engineers are experts in interfaces and getting and codifying and getting those things to the developers. And the developers are experts in their application.
And what works in both directions, right? Because security expert will know about security and he will create a service that will help a developer or she. Yeah. But then developer will know something else that will help him or her or them or it, because it can be a pillar. So don't be exclusive. So it's basically, when I said developers, I just want to clarify, I don't mean only end user developers. Basically, everybody is a developer. So everybody consumes services for everybody else.
And similarly, everyone's an expert. Like an expert might know everything about secret management, but then they might be consuming services from another expert in the company. So all through the platform.
New concept, come in, IDP.
Yeah. Internal developer platform, not portal.
Okay, because portal, we can see backstage, for example, right?
Portal would be a part of the story. Exactly. So it's a component in a much larger picture, right? It's one of the interfaces you give to people, not necessarily the only one.
Okay. Yes. What parts consist of the IDP? So technology, for example, security, portals, or it depends on how you can build it?
Security I would put aside for a second, right? You have basically only a few major components. You have API through which you can communicate with services. So what I'm saying now is the model that every single cloud vendor adopted so far. AWS, Azure, whatever. What does it have? It has API through which you can request something, whatever that something is. And you can request it through any interface. Web UI, CLI, desktop application, whatever you want, right?
IDE plugin.
But IDE plugin, for example. And you have controllers that do something when you ask for something. Oh, I want EC2 instance, right? There is API, boom, and then behind that API controller that does whatever needs to be done, right? That's a very simple architecture conceptually. That's all there is to it. I mean, it's very hard to set it up, but that's the whole architecture, right? API controllers do something. Now, what those controllers do, they can be in charge of, and now I'm going back to one of the things you mentioned before. Okay, one can be in charge of security, cool. One can be in charge of backend applications. Another one can be in charge of front-end application. The fourth one can be in charge of databases, right? What those controllers do, that depends on what you need in a company. And here's the question: how do you know what you need?
Exactly.
No, that's a question for you. How do you know what you need?
How do you know you need?
Yes.
I mean, it will depend on your business.
Yeah, exactly.
No, that doesn't depend on your business. That doesn't depend on your business.
You talk to your developers.
You talk to your customers.
Yeah.
To your customers. And your customers are developers. They're your customers.
What I meant is, I was saying like the business related with what it's the daily base of what people does, so you have the devs and they need some stuff. But actually you can talk to business people to say, hey, well, I want this from the ADP because you can get, like, for example, backstage documentation to get easier access. So,
but
business is very simple, right? What business needs is new features of the applications to be shipped yesterday. That's what business needs, right? And that's what developers that work on those applications, they're business.
Okay.
Right? Now, your job is to figure out what they need so that they do their job faster, more reliably. So, because that's business. Our infrastructure is not business. That's a necessity, right?
And they need a lot of things. So it's also your job to figure out what can I make that's going to have the maximum impact. And you're looking for use cases that are broad, that are required, and that are undifferentiated enough that you can build the customization into the platform capability.
It's interesting the perspective to say or to see my developers as a customers.
Yeah.
Because at the end, exactly, it is the point.
Yeah.
That's probably the number one cause of why platforms, internal platforms, were failing for decades. Because we've been building them for decades. And that's because there is always Joe in a company who knows exactly what people need. Right? And that always fails because you don't know what people need. Like, if there is a person who automagically knows what people need, then please join Upbound, because we're trying for years to figure out what customers need. Kind of, it's a very long process. Kind of, being a product manager is very hard. Figuring out what people need, because they cannot even articulate it easily, right? Because the people say, "Oh, I need this," and then you build this, and then they say, "Oh no, that's not what I need," right? And the number one first hire I would always do in a platform team is not a platform engineer, is not a developer, it's a product person.
Okay.
Treat it as a company. This is a company within a company. We need to sell our products, not necessarily for money, but kind of to others. How can we figure out what will people buy willingly?
And for that reason, platform use should not be required within the company. The platform needs to have its incentive to make good stuff that their developers are then going to want to adopt. If you require the use of a platform, you're messing up right from the beginning, because you're using a very valuable piece of feedback, of which is like, do developers want to use it? Is it actually helping their day-to-day so much that they are choosing the platform over not the platform?
Is the platform engineer a new role, a current role, or maybe it depends on the company that, we need a platform engineer, or what characteristic needs or skills needs a person that can apply of this technology,
So
or this role, or something like that?
It's a glue,
Okay.
right?
Okay.
It acts as a glue, because you have different experts, right? And no single person can know everything, right? I'm very good at security. I'm very good at databases. I'm very good at this. I'm very good at that, right? And now, until now, how did all those experts interact with others? You open a Jira ticket, and that person will do it for you one day, maybe, who knows, right? Now, the way I like to describe is that with platform engineering, we are converting all that experience into services that are consumable by others, right? So basically, what do you know? You know this, whatever that is. Cool. How can you convert that knowledge into a service? And that service will be guided by that product manager that will actually figure out whether people even need it, because maybe nobody needs it. Maybe you think you need it, but nobody else needs it, right? Or maybe somebody needs it and it's very important, but that's one person, and we have 500 other people that need something completely different.
And like starting building like a platform with a platform mindset, because I believe everybody has a platform, but they don't know maybe, or they don't manage it, So what will just start better, like technology talking? Like, it will be better just to start adding backstage, for example, and try to glue everything, or should we order the house, or
Backstage is last, right? Because think of it this way. Let's forget about platform engineering, right? You're building an application. It's going to be a typical application, front-end, back-end database, right? Back-end will expose an API, and then front-end will talk to that API, right? Can you start with the front-end before you have API that it will talk to? No, exactly. So first you build a backend with the API, right? And then you say, okay, now what is the user interface for that API? And that can be Backstage. It can be, as Whitney said, VS Code extension. It could be many different things. But you don't start with a user interface that will interface to nothing.
And if you think of it from a user perspective, like maybe the first time you provisioned a cluster through Google Cloud, you went to the web UI, you got a lot of education about how it's done, you made your choices, you click, 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 and that was fine. But then the 100th time you provision a cluster through Google Cloud, you would be ripping your hair out if you had to click through the same things over and over again. Like at that point, you want a CLI or the HashiCorp, the Terraform module, excuse me, or there are other ways to do it, faster ways that work into your workflow. So Backstage or a portal is great for that initial education. It's great to know what's available. It's great as once you've provisioned a lot of things, maybe here's a pane of glass so I can see everything I've made. But in terms of like getting it done, you want to have other interfaces to bring it to your workflow or the developer's workflow at the point that they need it, and not make them go out to a web UI.
Yeah, exactly. I was asking this because I feel that there could be like a misconception that, for example, doing platform engineering is implementing Backstage. you know.
Of course not.
And
I think
of
that's
course
a common
not.
misconception,
Mm,
honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. So that's why I was asking that, because I feel that first maybe you need to clean the house and then say, well, we're doing this process in this way. We could do something easier or create a service about that, and could be something as simple as a CLI tool, you know, or
So I would put CLI on the same level of as backstage, right? Kind of like you can have a CLI backstage, but first you do, okay, so this is a service that does something, whatever that service is, EC2 instance, right? And that service does whatever it is doing, and it is accessible through whichever API it's accessible, right? Once you do that, so let's think of it this way, right? You cannot create a Terraform, HashiCorp could not create Terraform for AWS before AWS created API and service.
Yeah.
So it cannot be, there was no EC2 arrived to Terraform after EC2 was created, not before, right? So those are all different interfaces, and you can have many interfaces, right?
Yes.
For the same API.
For the same thing, right?
Yeah.
The API is the same. There is only one API. Like AWS, right? There is only one API for EC2. And then you can have Terraform, you can have Backstage, you can have whatever you want, right? It's infinite number of interfaces that all go to the same place.
Yep.
But you cannot start without that place.
correct.
So start with APIs, because then you can add any interface onto them. And there's another reason to build on APIs, and that is when you make APIs as your basic building block as part of your platform. As your platform matures, you can compose those APIs into more complex solutions. So maybe at first you just offer an interface where a developer can spin up their own cluster for development. But then later, you also build APIs for deploying the application. You build an API for deploying the database. And then you can compose those together. So then eventually the developer could have the experience of one API, and they get their Kubernetes cluster with their application already deployed, already connected to a cloud database. It's all already integrated and working together.
Okay.
But you do that because you start building those APIs separately first, and that gets you to a point where you can make those more complex capabilities.
Nice. What about the observability and monitoring technologies? Because regularly, one question that in my case and the company we receive is, okay, I have 2 customers. I use, we can say customer, or we can say marks, right? For example, we use New Relic. You use Datadog. You use this one. And the question is, we can integrate our metrics, our code, our logs, or probably create a product that can integrate all the technologies in the same place. The question is, you can't, if you use OpenTelemetry, for example, in your code, you can implement this. Yep. What recommendation, in your opinion, the company need to, okay, I can say you need to apply this mindset, agnostic, for example, because you are building a product, but you can be available for all the different dashboard, all the different companies. It's good to have customized, agnostic, or probably can say, no, my product is only for New Relic. What do you think?
So first of all, you use standards like Prometheus and OpenTelemetry,
exactly.
And that's what's built into your capabilities. So your developers never even have to think about that. And then from there, they can choose, okay, this is already making the telemetry data that I need. I can choose how I want to visualize it or query it or whatever. You make the right thing to do, the easy thing to do. And if they still insist on using their New Relic or their particular solution, they're welcome to do the work of doing that. But that's just not something you're going to support as a platform when you get into these snowflake use cases or stubborn teams, or teams that have very good reason, not necessarily stubborn, but that don't want to change.
Yeah. One takeaway I'm taking from this conversation is that we need to like segregate, separate like the things what is built a platform, like for example, in this case, like New Relic will be the UI, and as we were mentioning with Backstage and the CLI,
will be an option.
Will be an option.
Exactly.
Yeah. Will be an option. You have New Relic, we have Datadog, we have Grafana, etc. Right? So in this case, the API will be like the base of what you're building the metrics. So the telemetry, call it Prometheus, call it Grafana. So call it OTel or Prometheus. So that's one important thing. Like, is a key takeaway from this conversation, that we need to know what is doing what. Like this is for visualization. This is making work the stuff, So it works like I will say like for everything. Like in this case for observability, the UI will be the tools that you're using to observe, but the APIs in this case will be like what is built in your code.
Because think of it from the perspective that if you're still talking about within the context of platform engineering, right?
Yep.
So you're not really providing UI. You can. That's optional, right? What you're providing is that you have a service that does something, whatever that service does, right? And among other things, that service is outputting some data, some metrics, some logs, whatever, right? And that data is stored somewhere. And that's where your job is finished, right? And then I, as a consumer, so let's say that you are AWS and you did just what I said, which is what they're doing. And then I, as a consumer, can choose to use Datadog, to use Grafana, to use anything else. Kind of your job as AWS, you can offer me optionally some monitoring visualization, whatever it's called in AWS, right? CloudWatch. Right? But that's optional. Kind of like what you're really giving me is data, right? And then go for it. And then I, as a consumer, I can choose to use that optional thing that you gave me, CloudWatch, or I can go somewhere else. You're not forcing your users to use anything specific, right? That's optional.
I think it's important to mention that when you make these platform capabilities, you also add guardrails. So when you give them an option to make their own cluster through your API, they don't, through mistakes or malice, make a 300 node cluster in your API. There needs to be like something that happens so that they can't waste resources, so they can't do insecure things. Like you need to have some protection. And I guess there are a few ways to do that. So we're talking about building security into your capabilities. Like we just talked about building observability into your capabilities, and security is another big thing you build into the capabilities and to the Kubernetes API itself that you're using to manage those capabilities.
Okay, got it. So what about all about GitOps? Do you think that we can integrate this into a platform?
Yes.
Technology like, for example, Flux, Argo CD, or
that's probably the easiest piece because it's really so. You have two parts of the story, right? You have a system that will monitor Git repository and synchronize into the cluster. You might want to add some kind of security in terms like who reviews that pull request before it's merged to the main line and so on and so forth. And that's about it. That's all there is to it. It's the simplest possible mechanism ever. Now, on top of that, if you want to go extra mile, this is now optional. And you can say, okay, so I'm giving you optionally to use Backstage. Cool. And then what that means that Backstage is not actually writing anything directly to the destination anymore, right? Then that means that if you're creating some kind of Backstage plugin, then that plugin is reading stuff from your control plane, from your cluster, but it is not writing anything, but it is pushing to Git. And then you have the circle from Git through Argo CD or Flux to your management cluster.
Got it. And so how we can convince, for example, I know this is a question for probably the people that, or developers or DevOps in the company that wants to implement this, but probably the boss or the organization say, what is the benefit from my business or from my company to implement platform? Because it can happen. No, all the companies are open to say, okay, I can invest time integrating this, but what is the benefit that I can get to using this mindset or this?
I think that's a good question because the platform doesn't directly affect the value stream, so it's important to be able to talk about this. But when you're unifying tooling, when you're unifying observability, then you have now a place where you can understand the whole company and everything the company's doing and how it integrates. When you're making a platform engineer, a developer's job easier, that is going to make your features come out faster. If you're making the way you provision infrastructure more standardized, now it's also going to be more secure, more compliant. It's almost like we have a huge mess and now we're tidying up, and because we're tidied up, we can ship so much faster than we could before.
We've been talking about platform engineering, but there's a topic right now that it's very trending, and it's impacting even our everyday life, which is AI. So how AI is impacting platform engineering besides faster time to code or those things.
When I think about AI, there's two ways that AI needs to be discussed. One is, because of AI, we're running different size workloads in Kubernetes and kind of needing to deal with Kubernetes differently just to manage AI related infrastructure. And then the other side of it is using AI tooling to do stuff. So which side of AI do you want to talk about? Not that I don't feel very expert
how do you run AI, or how useful AI is? Right?
Yeah.
Pick any.
Okay, let's say how do we use it besides just write faster code? How can we use AI in platform engineering like in other ways?
So let me start by saying that I feel that the last months are the first time that I actually feel that AI is useful to begin with. I felt that it was pretty useless until, let's say, this year, right? And that's because a couple of things happened, right? We had LLMs for a while now. They're getting better, but that's fine. That's only part of the story. Now we're having agents that are capable of actually doing something. Yep. And the last piece important is MCPs that are actually capable of providing the context that those agents need to actually communicate with LLMs. And now it kind of becomes a thing, whatever that thing is. And it's becoming pretty useful. But in the hands, so we are not, I don't know when, but we are not there yet that AI agents and everything else can be autonomous. We are not there yet, right? Yep. I cannot run it, okay, just run the code and push it to production. Kind of like that's not happening today. Or just create a cluster and everything you think you need and kind of like that's my new production. That's not happening either, right? So it is supervised by a person. And the very important thing is that that person needs to know a lot, right? To distinguish. Doesn't matter whether AI, and they're getting better, fails 95% of the time or 5% of the time. Doesn't matter. If you cannot detect that failure or miss or doing something wrong, you cannot redirect it in the right direction, the result is going to be worse than if you didn't use it. Yep. Right? So from that perspective, I think that AI, depending on a persona, if you're very young, it can be more like a learning experience. You can learn a lot with it, not actually do a lot, because you will not be able to distinguish good from bad, right? Yeah. If you're experienced, the more experienced you are, the more useful it is, right? So it should be used with caution, right?
What do you think is an ideal end state for that AI can maybe do for us someday if it was
ideal? Kind of like we can go crazy, right?
Yeah, let's go crazy.
I think so. Let's start with semi-crazy, half crazy, right? I feel that we will be moving more towards the direction of engineers being something like PR reviewers, right? Kind of like AI will be better and better. It's not only AI, but combination of things, better and better. And we will be more and more focused on being actually a combination of two things, product manager and PR reviewer, right? Kind of like, I can tell you what you need to do, and I might need to put a checkbox at the end of kind of done, right? Think like in a factory, right? Kind of
a prompt writer too.
Yes, prompt writer, that would be kind of like, but prompts are not single sentence, kind of like, it's actually very hard to, even to the human, to explain what we really want to build. Kind of like in some companies, it still takes months just to figure out what the heck are we doing, right? Yeah. So, but prompt writer ultimately, and the final confirmation, right? And eventually we might get to the stage that actually we are not doing the peer review requirement, but kind of like, I trust you 100%. I just don't know whether we are talking about 3 months, 3 years, 50 years. I don't know how long we are talking about moving to that phase, autonomy, right?
Okay, nice, got it. So automation is one of the DevOps pillars, I think so, that DevOps talk. What about operators, LLMs? For example, technologies or let me centralizing operators. What technologies the people can use in order to build operators into Kubernetes? For example, Queue Builder, another one. Or I don't know if you think that.
So there are two types of operators you want to create, right? One that is very unlikely that you will be creating, and that's something very like with Queue Builder, right? And I'll get back to that one, right? For vast majority of cases, you're creating an operator that is acting as that abstraction, as that service that we were talking about earlier within the context of platform engineering, right? And what does that mean? Let's say an example, right? You guys are using AWS, correct?
Yep.
Okay, so you want to enable people to use databases, right? What does it mean in AWS? That means that you need RDS, you need the Internet Gateway, you need subnets, VPCs, blah, 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 bunch of things, right? And schemas in those databases, and databases themselves in that server. So basically what you're creating an operator is to combine all that experience, all those resources, and say, okay, all that will be composed somehow through this interface, and that interface is whatever developers need. You don't know, but you will ask them and they will tell you, oh, I want to specify whether I want Postgres or MySQL or whatever I need, right? And for that, Queue Builder is an overkill, right? You have other options. You have Crossplane that I'm biased. I work with Crossplane. You have Crow. You have Kubevela, Gratix, there we go, and probably a couple of others, right? That are, think of them as evolution and then plus of what we were doing before with Helm charts, which you shouldn't be using. And then Queue Builder is when you want to do something very, very special. Like, for example, I don't know if any of you used CMPG, Cloud Native Postgres.
Yeah.
Database in Kubernetes, right? That's not something you compose. That's very, very specific. There is Go code over there all around creating stuff and things like that. But Queue Builder is good if you want something very, very specific. But in most cases, you want to just kind of combine things. Combine lower level resources from the higher level abstraction, right?
Nice.
Why might you want to use an API builder like Crow or Crossplane or Gratix instead of an operator?
Like Queue Builder. Operator, I mean, both are ending up being operators, but Queue Builder is more like, here's Go code. I'm going to write exactly kind of basically, I'm creating something equivalent to core Kubernetes operators.
Okay.
I have an idea right now. This idea could be considered like a platform or integrate to the platform. For example, have one YAML, and you can specify feature for create canary deployments using Argo CD, Instio. Because regularly configure this, you need to have experience and probably a lot of YAMLs. Can be centralized all the information that these services has in one YAML, and one developer can go type information, enter, kubectl applied, and that's it. Build all the things behind the scenes. Could be considered that.
Yes.
Okay. You're describing Crossplane.
No. For canary, actually no.
Okay.
Canary deployments.
Canary
deployments.
So canary deployments. Okay.
That would be actually a good scenario where you want Queue Builder rather than the tools I mentioned before, right? Because you will have custom logic. Go to Prometheus to check the metrics, and then depending on the metrics, go and modify this deployment that is a canary deployment, and modify the original deployment and stuff like that, right? So that would be Queue Builder, right? Because it's very, very special, very unique. And that's option number one. Option number two is use Flagger or Argo rollouts.
Argo rollouts.
Depending whether you can do it better. No, actually more projects in an area. So right now we have only 2 projects for canary deployments that I know of. Actually, there may be 4 that I know, right? So it's a very small number. Do it.
Okay.
Even if there is already a tool that does it, kind of like we always need multiple solutions to compete with each other. When there are only a few, that's never a good spot.
Yeah. No, I'm thinking that because, for example, one target or one goal that in the LATAM community we have is create something that probably could be a sandbox project or probably give more things. And right now we are seeing that there are different tools, but you needs so experience to integrate all in one. So the idea is to have one YAML, that's it. Behind the scenes, the operator build all the things. So it is simple idea, if some people have improve the idea.
There is no
Type.
such thing as a simple.
Okay, it's
It
not
always
simple.
becomes
Not in
complicated all the time.
Kubernetes,
Yeah. So we are right now finishing. I don't know if you have probably the last topics about or thoughts about platform or how the people can be involved in this. If one guy or one girl
Thank
is
you.
trying to move to this career, DevOps, for example, or platform engineer, what the skills, soft skills and technical skill needs to have.
The first step, I think, is to contact the nearest pillar of your community.
Oh
Okay.
no.
It's going to follow you for a long, long time.
You'll need to see the first episode if you want to understand. So go watch
If
it.
you haven't seen the first one, this makes no sense.
Yeah.
For real though, how does one platform engineering is hard because it does take at least a limited understanding of so many tools in the CNCF and so many different things and soft skills. So how does one begin to start?
I feel that in general in our industry, we have two types of personas, right? People who are vertical knowledge, right? I'm database expert. I spent 30 years of database. I know everything about PostgreSQL, right?
Yeah.
And you have horizontal knowledge. I know a bit about everything, right?
Yeah.
And I feel that platform engineers are better at this, right? So they're not really, if you know a bit about everything, you're not really expert in anything. So kind of, you cannot manage somebody's database. You don't know enough.
Yep.
The hill I'm going to die on is that there is no such thing as a full stack engineer, and there is no such thing as DevOps, precisely because of those reasons, right? But platform engineer, I think that it's very good if it has breadth of knowledge, right? Because it's a glue between those things. So I don't need to know everything about databases. I don't need to know everything about security, but you do, and I can glue it together, right?
Okay.
All right.
What else?
Do you have something to say?
No.
To keep well? All
Pura
right.
vida, pura vida.
Pura vida.
Pura vida.
So, thank you so much, Viktor, Whitney. The Costa Rican community is pretty grateful to have you here. And we are here more from you tomorrow at the keynotes of the KCD. And thank you so much.
Let me say that you thanked us already many times. I mean, we should thank you.
For
Kind of
real,
like,
that's what I was thinking.
it's my
When
privilege.
can
I came to Costa
what
Rica.
a
Kind of, I don't know
gift
why
to
you.
be here right now.
Okay,
Thank
appreciate
you for
it.
inviting
We appreciate
us.
it as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. And thank you so much all for you to take some time to watch this episode. I hope this is not the first time we join.
It is the first time. I hope it's not the last.
No, you're correct. Yeah, you're correct. Well, this is my first time doing a podcast, so that's
And
why.
great job, by the way.
Great
Thank
host,
you,
great
thank
host, great host.
Yeah.
Thank you. So yeah, I hope this is not the last time we join and we talk more about technology or any other stuff, whatever. And I hope you share the episode with it whenever, whoever you want. And thank you so much. And pura vida.
Yeah.
Whatever.
One last thing, really. Going back to the previous episode, ping me. I'm not going to say the same. Ping me if I can help something. I'll jump in.
All right. Thanks so
Don't be
much.
shy.
Pura vida.
Pura vida.
Pura vida.